Reincarnation, an ancient and fascinating concept that suggests the soul's journey continues in a new body after death, has intrigued humanity for centuries. While many have pondered the possibility of life beyond death, some individuals have experienced what seem to be irrefutable memories of past lives. These memories, often vivid and detailed, have been recorded throughout history, sparking both awe and skepticism. In certain rare and compelling cases, children have recalled events from a past life, offering startling proof that they may have lived before. This collection of stories delves into some of the most striking and well-documented cases of reincarnation. Each account brings us face to face with the mystery of the human soul and the potential for life after death. From the extraordinary experiences of James Leininger, who recalled his life as a World War II pilot, to the enigmatic story of the Pollock twins, who seem to return as the reincarnations of their tragically lost older sisters, these cases challenge our understanding of existence itself. Through the lens of real stories, we explore how certain children have lived with memories, behaviors, and even preferences from lives they couldn't have known. These accounts, some investigated by renowned researchers in the field, invite us to ask, could reincarnation truly be real? Or is there something else at work in these strange and captivating phenomena? Join us as we venture into the realm of the unexplainable, where the boundaries between life, death, and rebirth blur into an uncanny reality. The reincarnation of Shanti Devi. In the 1930s, in the small village of Mehrauli, just on the outskirts of Delhi, a young girl named Shanti Devi was born. Her childhood, though seemingly normal at first glance, would soon unravel into one of the most baffling cases of reincarnation that would spark debates, intrigue, and fear in the years to come. At the tender age of 4, Shanti began speaking about a previous life, an existence in a far-off town that she had never visited. Her parents, though initially dismissive, were forced to reconsider their skepticism when their daughter began describing a place called Mathura, hundreds of miles away. Shanti spoke of Mathura with remarkable clarity, recounting details of the city that she could never have known. She described a family, her family, in a past life, specifically a man named Kedarnath, her husband, and their home. At first, her parents assumed that this was nothing more than a child's fanciful imagination, a passing whim. But the depth and consistency of her descriptions grew too strange to ignore. Shanti spoke of a life she had led as a woman named Ludgi, a woman who had died tragically while giving birth to a child. She spoke of the deathbed scene in vivid detail, the pain, the blood, the helplessness. She even described the house where Ludgi had lived with her husband, the layout of the rooms, and even the specific smell of the house. But what terrified her parents the most was the clarity with which Shanti described the moment of Ludgi's death. Shanti spoke of a man, her husband Kedarnath, who had been left behind to mourn her untimely passing. This man's name, his face. Shanti described everything as though she had known him intimately. Though the village priest and other local leaders offered spiritual explanations, they all fell short of offering a clear answer. Shanti's behavior only grew stranger. At times, she would insist that her parents take her to Mathura, the city she had never visited but claimed to know as her own. She would call out the names of people she'd never met, remembering entire conversations, as though she had experienced them firsthand. The child seemed haunted by memories from a life she should have no recollection of. When Shanti's insistence grew too much to ignore, her parents made the decision to travel to Mathura, to follow the trail that Shanti's words had left behind. It was an arduous journey, spanning several days, and as they neared their destination, the weight of what they were about to face began to settle in. They knew they were heading towards something that defied explanation. Upon arriving in Mathura, the family found themselves in a town that seemed strangely familiar to Shanti. She immediately recognized landmarks that she had never seen in this life: the old banyan tree by the river, the narrow street that led to the market, and, most terrifying of all, the house she had once lived in. It was a modest home, yet it stirred something deep within her. The details she recounted were so specific, so hauntingly accurate, that her parents felt an overwhelming sense of unease. The villagers, skeptical at first, began to listen as Shanti described her life as Ludgi. She knew intimate details about the family and the home that were impossible for a child to have learned. Shanti recalled the day Ludgi had died, during childbirth, as she had claimed all along. Her parents were speechless when Shanti described the birth process, the exact position where Ludgi had died, the people present in the room. Every detail was too accurate to be explained by mere coincidence. In Mathura, a local elder who had heard of Shanti's tale suggested that they try to find Kedarnath, the man Shanti spoke of so frequently. At first, the villagers dismissed the idea, thinking it nothing more than a wild story. But as Shanti continued to speak of Kedarnath with such certainty, they decided to track him down. It was not easy, as Kedar had since remarried and had moved to a different part of the town, but after days of searching, they finally located him. Kedarnath, a middle-aged man who had long since given up the idea of ever hearing from his late wife, was brought into the presence of the child who claimed to be her. When Kedarnath walked into the room, something inexplicable happened. Shanti's eyes locked onto him, and without hesitation she called out his name, Kedarnath. She immediately ran up to him and embraced him as if no time had passed between them. The entire room fell silent. In that moment, Kedarnath's face turned pale. He was visibly shaken, not just by the child's recognition, but by the overwhelming accuracy of her words. Shanti spoke of Ludgi, of their life together, and, more importantly, of the events leading up to her death. She described their home in such fine detail, down to the color of the curtains, the way the sun filtered through the windows, the sound of the nearby temple bells. The man could not deny it. Shanti was speaking the truth. She had to be Ludgi, somehow reincarnated. Kedarnath, now fully convinced, began to recount the tragic events of Ludgi's death. He spoke of how devastated he had been, how he had never fully recovered from the loss. But what shocked him the most was the realization that, in some inexplicable way, his late wife had returned to him in the form of this young girl. Shanti's memories, which she could never have known, confirmed it beyond any reasonable doubt. She had been Ludgi, and now she had come back. The story of Shanti Devi's reincarnation spread like wildfire, drawing attention from all corners of India. Spiritual leaders, researchers, and even skeptics traveled to Mathura to witness the incredible case for themselves. For some, it was a testament to the possibility of reincarnation, a powerful reminder that life does not end with death. For others, it was a terrifying glimpse into the unknown, a reminder that the boundaries of life and death may not be as clear-cut as we like to believe. Shanti Devi's case is still one of the most well-documented and widely debated examples of reincarnation. It remains an enigma, and while many have tried to explain it through psychological or supernatural means, the fact remains that Shanti's memories were too accurate, too detailed, to be dismissed as mere fantasy. She lived the rest of her life in Merauli, but the question of whether she was truly the reincarnation of Ludgi never left her. In the years following the revelation, Shanti was often haunted by vivid memories of a life that felt as real as her current one. Though she grew up and married, she could never quite shake the feeling that she had once been someone else. Whether she had been Ludgi, a woman who lived and died long before her time, or whether something else was at play, remained a mystery that no one could answer. But her story would go down in history as one of the most compelling and chilling accounts of reincarnation ever documented. Shanti Devi's tale continues to fascinate and frighten, leaving us with a haunting question. Can the soul truly return? And if it does, can we recognize it when it does? Or are we forever at the mercy of memories from another time, echoes of lives lived before, like whispers carried on the wind, too strange and real to ignore? The case of James Leininger. James Leininger's story is one of the most remarkable and thoroughly investigated cases of possible reincarnation in modern times. It began in the late 1990s, when James was just 2 years old. His parents, Bruce and Andrea Leininger, initially thought their son's behavior was just the product of an active imagination. But over time, the details James shared about his supposed past life became so startlingly precise that they could no longer ignore the possibility that something far more extraordinary was at play. James had always been fascinated by airplanes, but this interest went beyond what would be expected for a young boy. He would often wake up screaming in terror from recurring nightmares. According to his parents, the nightmares were vivid, and James would scream, "Airplane crash! Little man can't get out." These were strange words for a child so young, and they initially confused his parents. It was not just the words that disturbed them, but the intense fear James experienced after every nightmare. The nightmares weren't just random. They seemed to be connected to something deep, something James couldn't fully understand. At the age of 3, James started to reveal bizarre details about his past life. One day, while playing with toy airplanes, James made a startling statement. "I was a pilot in the war. I was on a plane, and it got shot down. I was in the cockpit." His parents, confused but intrigued, didn't think much of it at the time, but over the following weeks, James began offering more specifics. He named a specific airplane model, a Corsair, a plane used during World War II. This alone was puzzling because at the time, James had never been taught about World War II or military aircraft. The details continued to come out. James described his time as a pilot, how his plane was shot down, and how he had died in a fiery crash. The most chilling detail came when James mentioned his own name. He claimed that in his past life he had been a man named James Houston. James Houston was a pilot who served during World War II and tragically died in 1945 when his aircraft was shot down in the Pacific. To verify this claim, his parents began researching the name James Houston and were shocked to discover that there had indeed been a pilot by that name who died in a plane crash in the Pacific during World War II. The details James provided, which included the exact circumstances of the crash and the location, seemed to align with historical records of James Houston's life. As the story unfolded, James began providing even more evidence of his previous life. He described the details of his military service, including the specific aircraft he had flown. The images James drew of his plane matched the exact appearance of a Corsair, a plane that had been used by the United States Navy during World War II. His knowledge of the plane's design was baffling, given that he was only 3 years old and had never been taught about it. As James continued to recount details about his past life, his parents became increasingly convinced that their son's memories were something more than mere coincidence. Bruce and Andrea Leininger were not the only ones who began to be convinced of the authenticity of James's claims. In 2000, the Leiningers contacted a man named Dr. Ian Stevenson, a prominent psychiatrist and researcher of reincarnation who had investigated many cases of children recalling past lives. Dr. Stevenson was intrigued by the case and decided to investigate. After conducting interviews with James and his family, as well as examining the historical records, Dr. Stevenson concluded that James's memories were indeed strikingly accurate. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came when Dr. Stevenson found a photograph of James Houston, the World War II pilot James had claimed to be. The moment James saw the photograph, he immediately identified it as a picture of himself in a previous life. He pointed to the photo and said, "That's me. That's my plane." His reaction was one of recognition, not just a vague familiarity, but a deep, visceral connection to the man in the picture. The details of James's story continued to match up with historical facts. For instance, James Houston had been stationed at an air base in the Pacific during the war, and James Leininger's recollections of the base, including its layout and even the smell of the place, were astonishingly precise. Furthermore, James had a recurring memory of being in a dogfight with Japanese planes, a fact that matched the history of the Pacific air battles during the war. Incredibly, James also recounted how his plane had been shot down, which led to his death. As the years went by, James's memories began to fade, which is common in cases of childhood reincarnation. However, his parents remained convinced that their son had lived before, and that his previous life had been one of sacrifice and valor. Bruce and Andrea Leininger eventually wrote a book about their experience, called Soul Survivor: The Reincarnation of James Leininger, which detailed the extraordinary events and the research that confirmed their son's claims. The case of James Leininger remains one of the most thoroughly researched and documented instances of possible reincarnation in modern history. The level of detail that James provided about his past life, combined with the historical verification of his claims, is what sets this case apart from many others. It's a story that leaves us questioning the nature of life, death, and the possibility that our souls might live on in ways that are beyond our understanding. Was James Leininger truly the reincarnation of James Houston, the World War II pilot? The evidence suggests that the answer may be yes, but ultimately, the mystery of reincarnation continues to be one of the most perplexing and fascinating phenomena that science and spirituality have yet to fully explain. The Leininger family's experience, both harrowing and remarkable, offers a glimpse into the mysterious nature of reincarnation. For James, his vivid memories of a past life will remain a defining part of his childhood. His story is not just a tale of an extraordinary claim, but a reminder that there is still much about the human soul that remains shrouded in mystery. The case of James Leininger leaves us to ponder. Do the echoes of our past lives linger within us, waiting to be unlocked? And if they do, are we brave enough to face them? The reincarnation of Dorothy Eady, Sety. The story of Dorothy Eady, also known as Sety, is one of the most famous cases of reincarnation in history. Born in 1904 in London, Dorothy's life would take an extraordinary turn that would lead her to ancient Egypt, a place she claimed to have lived in a past life. Her story is both mysterious and captivating, and it challenges our understanding of reincarnation. When Dorothy was 3 years old, she fell down a flight of stairs, a fall that left her unconscious for several days. Upon awakening, she began exhibiting strange behaviors and expressing a fascination with ancient Egypt. She would describe Egypt in great detail, although she had never been there. Her parents, concerned by her obsession, tried to ignore it. But Dorothy's attachment to the ancient civilization only grew stronger over time. As she got older, Dorothy began to recall specific details about her past life in Egypt. She claimed that she had been a priestess named Bentrashit, who had lived during the reign of Pharaoh Sety I around 3,000 years ago. Dorothy's memories of ancient Egypt were so vivid and precise that they left those around her in awe. She described temples, rituals, and the geography of Egypt, all of which were completely unknown to her at the time. Dorothy even became convinced that her previous life was the key to her existence, and she began to live her life with a deep sense of connection to the ancient land. One of the most astounding aspects of Dorothy's memories was her ability to recall specific details about the ancient Egyptian culture and religion. She described the role of the priests, the temple ceremonies, and the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians with such accuracy that it was impossible to dismiss as mere fantasy. Dorothy also claimed to have been in love with Pharaoh Sety I, a relationship that, according to her, was tragically cut short when she was killed in a temple attack. Her memories of this life were so compelling that she began to believe that her true home was in Egypt, not London. In her early 20s, Dorothy traveled to Egypt for the first time. Upon arriving, she felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity. She immediately recognized the landmarks of Cairo and the ancient temples, even though she had never seen them before. She became particularly drawn to the temple of Sety I in Abydos, a sacred site in Egypt that she had described in detail long before ever visiting the country. It was there that Dorothy had a life-changing experience. Standing before the temple, she began to speak in a language that no one around her could understand. It was an ancient form of Egyptian that she had never learned in her current life, yet she spoke it fluently. Her experiences in Egypt only deepened her belief in reincarnation. She continued to visit the country frequently, eventually moving there and changing her name to Sety, meaning Mother of Sety. She settled in Abydos, near the temple of Sety I, where she spent the rest of her life. Sety worked as a guardian and caretaker of the temple, living a simple life dedicated to the preservation of ancient Egyptian culture. She spent her days studying the hieroglyphs and ancient texts, claiming that she was reconnecting with the knowledge of her past life. Sety's knowledge of ancient Egyptian culture became so extensive that it earned her respect among scholars and archaeologists. She was consulted by Egyptologists and experts in ancient history, who were amazed by her insights. Sety was able to identify specific symbols and explain religious practices with remarkable accuracy, often providing information that was not available in any historical texts. Her contributions to the study of ancient Egypt were invaluable, and she became a well-known figure in the field. Despite her extraordinary knowledge, Sety's claims of reincarnation were met with skepticism by some. Many dismissed her as a delusional woman who had become obsessed with ancient Egypt. However, her detailed memories and the accuracy of her knowledge could not be easily explained away. Over the years, Sety became a legend in her own right, a living embodiment of the idea that the soul may indeed live on after death. Sety spent the last years of her life in Egypt, where she continued to study and live among the ruins of the ancient temples. She died in 1981, and her legacy continues to fascinate those interested in reincarnation and the mysteries of the past. Her story remains one of the most compelling accounts of a person who believed they had lived before in another time and place. Sety's connection to ancient Egypt was so deep and profound that it seemed as though she had truly lived in that distant world. Today, Sety's life is still studied by those interested in reincarnation, spiritualism, and the mysteries of the human soul. Her story challenges our understanding of time, memory, and identity, and it leaves us wondering whether reincarnation is truly possible, or if Sety's extraordinary memories were the result of something else entirely. Regardless of the explanation, Sety's life and work continue to captivate the imagination of those who seek to understand the mysteries of life and death, offering a fascinating glimpse into the possibility of past lives and the profound connections that can exist across time and space. The case of the Pollock twins. The Pollock twins, June and Jennifer, are one of the most puzzling cases of reincarnation in modern history. Born in the small town of Hexham, England in 1958, their story began long before they were born, when a tragic car accident took the lives of their older sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock. Joanna, aged 11, and Jacqueline, aged 6, were killed in the accident on May 5, 1957, when they were struck by a car while walking home. The loss of the two girls devastated their parents, John and Florence Pollock. As they tried to cope with the loss of their daughters, something extraordinary began to unfold. Just a year after the deaths of the Pollock sisters, Florence discovered that she was pregnant with twins. The birth of June and Jennifer in 1958 was seen as a bittersweet blessing. While their arrival brought joy, the lingering grief over their lost daughters remained. But what happened next was beyond belief. As the twins grew older, strange and inexplicable occurrences began to happen that led their parents to question whether the girls might somehow be the reincarnation of their older sisters. When they were just toddlers, June and Jennifer began to show signs of having memories of their late sisters' lives, memories they could not possibly have known. The first sign came when the twins began to speak about their previous life. They would refer to their older sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline, by name, and describe events from their lives with startling accuracy. For example, June and Jennifer, who had never been told the details of their sisters' lives, would describe Joanna and Jacqueline's clothing, their toys, and even their habits. The twins also began to display an eerie knowledge of places they had never been, such as the house where the Pollock sisters had lived before their deaths. One of the most remarkable aspects of the case was the twins' recall of specific details from their sisters' lives. June and Jennifer seemed to recognize places they had never visited, but described them in vivid detail. They referred to the bedroom where Joanna and Jacqueline had slept, the garden where they had played, and the street where the accident had occurred. Their parents were astounded as the twins would speak of these places as though they had lived there themselves. Perhaps the most shocking evidence came when the twins began to ask for the same toys and items that belonged to their deceased sisters. When they were just 3 years old, they would ask for specific dolls and objects that had once belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline. June, in particular, became attached to a particular doll, which had been Joanna's, and would insist on carrying it everywhere she went. Jennifer also displayed a deep emotional attachment to another doll that had been Jacqueline's, even though she had never seen it before. The twins' connection to their late sister's memories went beyond just material items. June and Jennifer would occasionally exhibit behaviors and mannerisms that mirrored those of their sisters. For example, when the family visited the old home where the girls had lived, June and Jennifer were able to identify rooms and objects in the house with uncanny precision. They would say things like, "This is where Joanna and Jacqueline used to play," or "This is where we used to sleep." It was as if the twins were reliving the lives of their older sisters, but through a different lens. One particularly chilling moment occurred when the family visited the scene of the car accident where Joanna and Jacqueline had died. The twins, who had never been told the full details of the incident, were able to describe the event in shocking detail. They spoke about the moment of impact and the events leading up to the accident as though they had been present. They even pointed out the exact spot on the road where their sisters had been struck, which was something they could not have known without being told. John and Florence Pollock were stunned by these events, but did not immediately come to the conclusion that their daughters had been reincarnated. However, as the similarities between the twins and their deceased sisters grew more apparent, they began to believe that the children might indeed be the reincarnations of Joanna and Jacqueline. The case of the Pollock twins attracted the attention of researchers and parapsychologists, who were fascinated by the accuracy of the twins' memories. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a well-known psychiatrist and researcher in the field of reincarnation, studied the case in detail and concluded that the twins' memories could not be explained by ordinary means. According to Dr. Stevenson, the details the twins provided about their deceased sisters' lives were far too specific to be the result of coincidence or imagination. The Pollock twins' story has remained one of the most compelling cases of reincarnation in history. While skeptics have offered alternative explanations, such as the possibility of subconscious suggestion or the power of suggestion from the grieving parents, the sheer number of accurate details and the consistency of the twins' memories have led many to believe that their case is genuine. As the twins grew older, their memories of their past life gradually faded, which is typical in cases of reincarnation. However, They continued to display certain behaviors and preferences that reflected the personalities of their deceased sisters. For example, June, who had once been deeply attached to Joanna's doll, later expressed an interest in similar dolls and toys, even as an adult. Jennifer, too, exhibited traits and preferences that aligned with Jacqueline's personality. While the Pollock twins' memories of their past life eventually faded, the story of their reincarnation remains one of the most striking and puzzling examples of the phenomenon. The case raises important questions about the nature of the soul, memory, and the possibility of life after death. Is it possible that our souls are reborn into new bodies, carrying with them the memories of past lives? The Pollock twins' case suggests that there may be more to life and death than we currently understand, and that the mysteries of reincarnation may be closer to the truth than we dare to imagine. The story of the Pollock twins continues to captivate and perplex, offering a haunting glimpse into the possibility of reincarnation and the connections that can transcend even death itself. Whether or not we choose to believe in their story, it remains one of the most powerful and thought-provoking cases of reincarnation ever documented.